Hi, I'm Rob Johnstone from Woodworker's Journal, and today I'm going to demonstrate how to prepare lumber that is twisted or in some other way distorted. Lumber is a dynamic material, and as it dries, either with air drying or kiln drying, it can sometimes twist or distort. There's basically 4 different types of distortion. There are 4 main types of wood distortion. There's cupping, there's bowing, think of a bow and arrow, spring or sprung, flat in length, but it curves like a river going around a bend, and twisted, like a cloth being wrung out. Notice that I didn't say warped. Warped is a common term that is pretty non-descriptive, and so is less useful. Although I guess if you wanted to, you could say all 4 of those distortions were warped. In a previous video, I demonstrated the basic steps of using a jointer and a planer to prepare rough lumber. You can find a link to it in the information section below. Today, I'm going to demonstrate how to prepare some of those distorted pieces, which is a little bit trickier. Distorted lumber like this looks more like firewood than usable hardwood, but there are usable sections of the boards. And that is the key to dealing with distorted lumber. Cutting the piece into smaller usable sections that match your material list is the first step. It lessens how much the distortion affects each piece and lessens the amount of material you'll need to remove to get a properly prepared piece of wood. You may have noticed that I used a bandsaw to rip this piece rather than a table saw. That's because distorted lumber can easily bind up on a table saw blade, and that can lead to stalling your motor or even kickback. Because the bandsaw blade cuts straight down, it eliminates that risk. If you don't have a bandsaw, a handheld jigsaw will do the job. We're now ready to joint this piece of wood flat. Our goal is to get it flat across its length and across its width. But how are we going to do that with this twisted piece of lumber? The first step is to determine where the high spots are on the face of the board. Those need to be removed first. To do that, take a small amount of material off of one end, then spin it around and do it again. You may have to do it a few times. With the high points taken down a bit, now we're ready to run this thing completely across the jointer and flatten this face. When that's done, now you form a 90-degree edge using the jointer. You're now ready for the planer. Because of the wood's previous distortion, the board will vary in thickness quite a bit. For that reason, take several shallow passes as you thickness the stock. Twisted lumber is the most difficult of the distortions to deal with. Now we'll quickly go over the other 3 and discuss how to deal with them. Preparing a bowed piece of stock is just like dealing with twisted lumber. The bow means you'll have 2 high points on either end of the board. Start by cutting the stock into the smallest usable piece, and then proceed with jointing the high spots down. Dealing with cupped lumber is once again made easier by ripping your stock down to the smallest usable piece. Move on to the jointer and place the cupped face down. Then simply run the board over the cutter head until you have a flat surface. Pretty easy. Then onto the planer. The final distortion that we need to deal with is the spring or the sprung board. It's flat in width, but bends in a curve like this board. It's hard to find bad lumber sometimes, so I actually had to manufacture this example. As you may have guessed, fixing this distortion is as easy as cutting it to length, striking a line on the board, and ripping a straight edge on the bandsaw. Then you treat it like any other piece of wood on the jointer and planer. So that's the basics when it comes to dealing with distorted lumber using your jointer and your planer. Like any other woodworking technique, practice makes perfect, and that's true of these as well. I hope you enjoyed today's video. Maybe you learned something. I'm Rob Johnstone from Woodworker's Journal. Thank you for watching.